There's a fundamental divide in the workplace. Some see work as static, fixed, predictable, and finished once it's delivered, while others embrace its dynamic, ever evolving nature. This distinction isn't just philosophical, it shapes how we structure teams, develop skills, and respond to change. Today, let's explore why waterfall approaches depend on the static view and how Agile thrives on embracing change, and what that means for creating workplaces that can adapt to the accelerating pace of transformation and innovation in the age of AI. So first, let's take a look from the historical perspective. Where does this come from? Where does the difference come from? Is it just posturing and philosophical preferences, ideology, beliefs, or is there something more tangible? And the answer that we see is that historically, humanity has been solving relatively simpler problems than the ones that we're facing up ahead. If we needed to build something, it was a matter of identifying where we were going to build it. If we're going to be made of rocks, well, where do we get the rocks? Go get the rocks, and then we place them. And it was a much simpler problem to solve. I'm not discounting the complexity that may be sometimes. I mean, after all, the Masons were excellent at the work that they were doing in their time. And even today, it might be difficult to replicate. But my point is that whatever needed to be mapped out, we could map it out. There was a plan that we could come up with. And that plan took us to create the blueprints, and we just needed to execute them. And the way that we structured the work was that there was a small group of people who figured out the tough puzzle, however tough it might be, and they came up with that plan, and then they delegated that plan for execution to the people who had the skills to be able to execute according to the plan. But we were able to create those plans up front. The vision of what we needed to do was clear up front. That's a critical aspect. And the work was well defined. It was defined for having a beginning, during the execution, the middle, and then the end. It's done. Move on to the next thing. This is a type of work that humanity dealt with for a very long time. The industrial age comes along and we optimize the way of execution. We designed the work in a way that was repeatable, and it needed to be highly controlled so that we could reach levels of efficiency, high levels of efficiency and economies of scale. That assumes stability in the work that needs to be done in the environment to execute it. In that kind of work, requirements up front make sense. Requirements up front means that we look at everything that needs to be done in the long term, and we come up with a plan to deliver to that long term. And that becomes a source of truth. It is the belief that these requirements can be fully known at the beginning, with little need to adjust it as we move along. This is the environment under get it right the first time makes sense. Because if you've taken the time and you've looked closely and you've really thought about it carefully, you should be able to predict everything and all of the steps necessary in order to deliver. Mistakes are treated as failures instead of opportunities for learning, and perfection becomes the target. The more perfect you are, the better you are at meeting those targets and executing exactly the way that we expected, the more predictable the costs are, the less the risk is, and you optimize economies of scale. All of these things are possible when we are able to define the work. And in order to do that, in order to deliver, we need to have specialized roles and departments responsible for the type of the work that's being done. So we take whatever project, and I'm using the word very intentionally because this is the domain of projects. Agile has nothing to do with projects. Waterfall? Absolutely. There are projects that need to be done. And in those projects, we can break down the types of skills, the type of work that needs to be done along the way throughout the workflow and then the timeline. And then we identify the people who have the best skills in order to deliver at each stage of the implementation. So work is broken into distinct functions to be performed in isolation. And then we have the handoffs from each one of those functions. They're different groups that do different aspects of the implementation. In this kind of model, we're bringing people to the work. So think of it that we have a thing that needs to be built, and we're bringing along the people who have the appropriate skills to get it done. They come in, boom, 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 they get it done, and then they move on to the next thing. And the next thing that they're going to do exactly the same thing. They're going to come in, they're going to execute what they know, and then they move on to the next thing. They don't have a direct and a long-term relationship to the thing that they're building. They're just coming in and executing their skill, what they know, what they're capable of, and then they're moving on to the next thing and repeating the same thing over and over. This it comes from the manufacturing line. where we have specialized stations that are doing different kinds of work. And as we move down the implementation line, we execute each one of those different skills along the way. There's types of work that aligns very well with that. Project work aligns with that. And in that scenario, if that's the type of work that we're doing, if we can truly define our work in that way and it aligns well, and the work that needs to be done has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then we move on to the next thing, rinse and repeat, highly repeatable work, things that we've done in the past or things that we expect to do multiple times in the future, this makes sense. And again, this is the world of projects, and there's no problem with that. That works. Waterfall depends on static assumptions in order to work because they're linear phases for execution. We rely on fixed inputs at each one of the phases. So to review very quickly, Waterfall in its implementation, roughly speaking, there are many ways of classifying it, but roughly speaking, we have a requirements phase where this is the moment that we're figuring out everything that needs to be done and we're coming up with that plan. Then we design the implementation, so that's the plan, and we have all of the pieces put together, identified upfront, requirements upfront, and then we build the thing according to the plan. And finally, we test it, and then we release it, we give it to the customer. That assumes that the previous phases, as we move from phase to phase, that previous phase is complete and correct. We're not going back. There's no going back. We have completed that phase of the work, and we're moving on to the next phase. This works for the type of work that aligns with it, and it reduces risk. And it reduces cost and allows us to develop expertise at executing the same thing over and over and over again, highly repeatable. It has delivered wonderful results. There was a time that building nuts and bolts, the quality of the nut and bolt, maybe they broke, maybe they didn't break. Now we have quality that is highly repeatable. You can expect things to perform at a specific level. Because we have reached that level of being able to repeat reliably, repeatably, and consistently the work that needs to be done. But again, this is a work that we repeat over and over again. We're familiar with it. We can do that, and we can create a plan to execute to deliver that which is known. Discovery and emergence, that's not part of this. There's a time and a place to discover. That's the requirements. And we're able to discover everything that needs to be discovered to implement the whole thing. But once you are going, once you are executing, no, too late. That should have been done earlier. That's the mindset. Waterfall expects discovery to happen before execution, and it rejects the idea of emergence, new insights gained mid-work. That's not valid input. In this model, that emergence signals failure. Somebody didn't look at this carefully enough. Somebody wasn't paying attention. What happened? This is a problem. It's a derailment. It's not valued. That's not progress. Change is seen as failure. Requests for change mid-execution are met with frustration. At one iteration in my life, I was a project manager. I completely understand and can commensurate with project managers. If you have to work with Microsoft Project and put a change in there and adjust the change, oh my God, that's painful. Okay, it's not just painful in the tools, the whole mindset, the whole expectation that you're coming in and you're making a change to the plan. Why? Why are you changing that plan? Why didn't we think this before? It makes sense in that world. The world of work that aligns with the predictability of creating the plan. Why didn't we figure that out? That makes perfect sense. And there's nothing wrong with that. It aligns well with the type of work. But if we're going to be changing things midstream, we've got to be really careful with that. That's the recipe to build a perception that we're changing the scope in the middle of it. And then all kinds of blame and finger pointing starts. Got to be really careful with that. In that world, documentation is a control mechanism. We have a lot of documentation. Waterfall produces a lot of documentation, and it's seen as the single source of truth. However, there is a disconnect between the expectation of execution and the actual execution. Whenever there's just reality, the reality of life and work happens, we end up with a documentation that's outdated or doesn't align perfectly with what was actually implemented. That is a characteristic that happens in Waterfall. And another thing that happens in Waterfall is that there is this approach, this view of work that it's done forever. It's a fallacy, but the view is that once we've completed it, delivery is treated as the end point rather than a milestone along an ongoing evolution. For some work, hey, you needed to create a bolt and nut. You built a bolt and nut, you deliver the bolt and nut, done and over. Is this wrong? Of course not. And in fact, sometimes from a psychological perspective, I think that it can be very rewarding to have a type of work that at the end of the day, you finished it, you've done it, you've delivered it, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't take that home. It's done, it's over. Move on to the next thing. The next day will be a different thing. And I think that's perfectly valid. There's types of work that align with that. And from a job satisfaction perspective, you know that you did a good job delivering what you needed to deliver. It's done. You don't need to worry about it. You come in the next day and fresh start. Agile takes a completely different view, but not because it's a different philosophy, because it's addressing an entirely different problem. It's not dealing with highly predictable things. It's not dealing with things that we're going to be repeating over and over and over again. It's not dealing with things that we can figure out a plan up front. We can't. That's the problem. That's a challenge. And when we try to impose on teams that they have to come up with a plan up front, when they're dealing with work that you can't, the best thing that teams can do is just guess. And I've seen it time and time again. For years, I have seen teams under Waterfall, before Agile existed, just guessing. And yeah, those guesses were very often wrong. And this was the frustration that happened around the dot-com era, when teams were pushed against the wall to give estimates and to give plans where they honestly didn't know. They were guesses, and management became very frustrated because it's like, your estimates never work. How come you didn't know this? Because the mindset was expecting that they would know. No, they couldn't know. It was not possible. The work did not allow that. This is why Agile emerges, because Agile recognizes that there's types of work, and now it's becoming more the majority, the prevalent type of work that you can't know. It's highly complex. Complex work is inherently changing. It assumes uncertainty. New information will always be popping up and involving customer needs. It's just natural. It's not a situation where the customer didn't spend enough time thinking about it, or we didn't spend enough time asking the customer and getting what they truly needed. Sometimes the customer truly doesn't know. At the early stages of developing websites, for example, this happened all the time in website design. This is where feedback loops are so important, because the feedback loops are fueling learning. Continuous customer and team feedback enables better direction and less rework when we don't know what we actually have to build. So back to this website design, people knew in the early stages that they needed to have a website. Okay, websites were important; they're still today, but they didn't know what to put in them. They didn't know how the website was going to fit in with their business, what customers wanted to see on the website, what kind of capabilities. They didn't know. And it wasn't until website designers started putting the pages together that the customer started saying, oh, now I can see it. Now it's no longer conceptual. It's actually something that I can see. And now that I see it, well, it would be good if we did this or we did that. The waterfall approach would become very frustrated. It's like, why didn't they know that? Well, because they didn't. It doesn't matter why. They didn't know. And we need to be able to adapt to that, to the fact that they didn't know. Today, that's happening in spades. Not because necessarily we don't know, but just simply because it doesn't exist yet. And as we get into the implementation, AI suddenly comes up with a new thing, and we go, oh, hold on a minute, let's include that. Oh, that would make it really easy. That would make it a lot better than what we were thinking. And we need to incorporate it. And this is happening sometimes literally on a daily basis. So we need to be completely prepared to pivot sometimes, and at other times just adapt whatever plan we thought we were going to do, adjust it to the realities. It's like saying, I want to go to Europe, and all the trip, okay, from the moment that we get up to the moment that we land in Europe, we're going to be blindfolded. Well, we need to have a lot of feedback to help us get there safely. That feedback is what's going to keep us moving safely step by step until we get to the destination. It's not that we don't know where we're going. We're going to Europe. But along the way, there are tons of things that we don't see, and we need the feedback in order to guide us along the way. It's kind of like that. We have a general sense of what we need to do. Yes, that is what this is what gets us started. That's what brings the customers to us to say, hey, I'd like to engage with you in something. What is that something? We can describe it to that level. But the details of getting from point A to point B, we don't know all those. We don't have all those details. So we need to go incrementally, through iterations, get ourselves one step of the way along the way. And iteration requires adaptability. Working in small increments helps teams to respond in real time without derailing overall progress. So we continue on our trajectory to deliver that website, to get to Europe, to reach that desired outcome. But along the way, incrementally, small increments, we take those steps with the feedback to help us stay on track, on course to that destination. So working is working to learn. It's not just to execute our expertise, but it's to learn along the way what it is that we need to do and then apply our expertise to do it. We're delivering value early and often, and that creates new insights which form the next iteration and form and shape the next iteration. Products and services, this is the key characteristic and the difference between project work and product and service work. Products and services are living systems. They are organic. They're continuously changing, and they need to be adapted as we learn new things. And Agile supports the ongoing improvement and alignment with emerging needs. So in this model, we change from the bringing people to the work, wherever the work is, and they're bringing their expertise and they just execute, to bringing work to the team. We establish stable teams that have a lot of skills, that have a lot of innovation, creativity, puzzle solving, and they're very vested. You bring something to them and they're like, oh, okay, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do? Let's discover that. And let's apply our skills to figure it out and move along. Engaged teams and team engagement in Agile is essential because they're solving a puzzle. The business needs to come up with the startup-minded teams. That's really what we're creating. These teams are ready to leverage their skills and their expertise to solve the puzzle without knowing what the full picture actually looks like. And that requires engagement. That requires a lot of pride in the work that we're doing and a lot of investment in what we're doing. That's the kind of teams that we need to develop. And that aligns with the type of work. So the key difference in here is that the work has shifted. It's not a philosophical change. It's an adaptation to a different type of work. And the teams that are working in this highly changing and adaptable environment, they need different kind of skills. Waterfall requires narrow specialization, and that limits agility. Think about it, when you have a very well-developed skill, okay, in a static environment, that reinforces rigid roles that resist adaptation. And you have the opportunity to deliver to mastery level what you know within that very narrow context. When you try to step outside of that context, that's somebody else's domain, another expert's domain. So we need to have, in order to respond to dynamic work, we need to have both breadth and depth of knowledge in order to cover a much broader scope of work dynamically. And whatever we need today is going to be different from what we need tomorrow. Dynamic work benefits from team members who understand multiple disciplines and who can pivot as needed. Again, we're bringing work to them. We're bringing a puzzle to them. We want for them to solve it. These are experts, and they're going to go in and apply their full toolkit of expertise, not just a single skill, but a full toolkit of expertise end to end, and they're going to figure this out. It doesn't have to be 100% in every team. There is such a thing as teams collaborating with each other. And largely, we want a single team to have as many of the skills as possible. Economies of scale don't allow us to put all experts in every single team. That's unrealistic. So that's where we do need to work with other teams. However, for the most part, the bulk of the work, we do want a single team, a small team of people very entrepreneurial kind of approach to be able to solve the puzzle and take it as far as possible on their own. So when we're looking at the structure of teams, in traditional waterfall approaches, we typically talk about I and T shaped teams and team members. So let's look at an acronym that might help you remember this. I'm just going to touch on this briefly so you're aware. And it's item pi. So item pi refers to the different talent shapes that influence how adaptable and collaborative individuals and teams can be in dynamic environments or otherwise in waterfall. So again, in waterfall, we have the I and the T of item. So what does that mean? I is the I shaped. They're deep in one area. They're the experts. They have limited flexibility. Do you want fries with that? I want pickles. So sorry, we have fries. That's it. Okay. Don't try to go outside of that because we have one flavor and that's it. We will produce any car you want as long as it's black. Any color you want as long as it's black. Okay. That's specialization. And that specialization has its place. Waterfall works very well with that kind of specialization. I-shaped, very deep in that one area. And that waterfall also works in T-shape, where, okay, I know I'm a master of nuts and bolts. You want to talk about screws? I know what screws are. And okay, let's have a conversation. And soon into the conversation, I'm going to say, hold on a minute. I just know how to use screws. I don't know how to mate them. I don't know the physics and the dynamics of screws. For that, we're going to have to talk to the expert. But it's not that we can't talk about it. We do have some expertise and we do have some knowledge. So T-shaping allows teams to branch out a little bit more, do a little bit beyond what they're masters of with limitations. Both I and T work for waterfall, and that's where it stops. When we're looking at Agile, we really need to be looking at E-shaped. So in item pi, the E stands for combined deep knowledge with exploration, experience, and execution. This is where teams over time develop real hands-on experience and they apply to their knowledge across multiple areas of expertise. We also have M-shaped, where there are multiple areas of depth. And this is real depth. Just as we have somebody who in the I is expert in one area, M are experts in multiple areas. And then we have the pie shape with a broad base plus multiple specialties. The point in here is that we want to see as we're looking into the future of the work that humanity needs to do, we're going to need fewer and fewer I and T-shaped teams and individuals because that's a simple work. And that simple work is the one that's prime for automation. That's prime for AI to take over. What we need is more E, M, and pi-shaped teams and individuals because those are the ones that are going to be able to span across many disciplines and aptitudes and be able to deliver more comprehensive solutions. These teams are better suited for adapting to dynamic environments and collaborative problem solving. And it's that collaborative problem solving that really requires having a broad perspective, not that narrow perspective. So in this world of bringing work to the people, to the experts, to the problem solvers, teams pull work based on their strengths, their context, ability to cover, and their availability. It's less on assignment, more on ownership. This is a completely different approach from project management. So the organizational implications of this approach is then in static thinking, that breeds silos, that breeds the separation of departments, job roles, titles. These are all tightly scoped with rigid handoff protocols. That's the type of environment that leads to cooperation, not collaboration. Cooperation is about throwing it over the wall to the next group that's going to be responsible. Here's a hot potato. I've done what I need to do with it. Now you do your part to deal with it. That's cooperation. Collaboration is we're all in it together all the way until it reaches the hands of the customer. Very different approach. Dynamics environments need continuity. There's a long-lived teams that evolve together to handle change better than ad hoc project groups. They're collaborative, and that collaboration takes time to develop. This is why Agile teams are long-term. They're not just brought together to the work, to the situation, and then disbanded right after they're done. No, we want these teams to stay together as long as possible. Attrition is going to happen. Teams will change. That's just life. However, as much as possible, we want to preserve those teams because When you have a team of individuals that each bring slightly different skills, slightly different depth of knowledge and expertise, the team learns how to leverage that from each other. And that gives the team as a whole a lot of strength that they can use. If you're constantly changing the team members, they don't know each other. They don't know what to expect and how to rely on each other. That makes it very difficult to implement from an agile perspective. You're always having to relearn what others are capable of doing. That introduces a lot of delays and inefficiency. So you want to keep stable teams that are going to be working in a very dynamic way. And where planning is concerned, the horizon is completely different. We're shifting from the very detailed requirements up front, multi-year roadmaps and detailed plans to execute. We're moving away from that to directional strategies with room for emergence and course correction. Because as we learn along the way, we're going to have to adapt those plans. And this breaks a fallacy in a misunderstanding about Agile. Some people say that, oh, Agile people don't plan. Au contraire, Agile people plan all the time, meaning they're constantly adapting the plan as we learn things, as we discover new things. We have a plan because we need to have a plan to get us started. We're not just going blind. And as we take the next step, we use the information to adjust the plan. Sometimes it's just a ratification of the plan. Oh, yeah, we can continue going. And other times it's a complete pivot, a complete change in the plan. That needs to be part of that flexible approach. And when we are able to do it, this adaptation speed is a competitive edge. This ability to learn faster than our competitors matters more than executing the perfect plan. Those who can't adapt, those who can't deal with the failures and recover quickly from them and keep going forward, those are the ones that are left behind. It's the ones who are not afraid of getting started, not having all the answers, just with a skeleton of a plan, but something to get them going, and who are capable of recovering as soon as there's an issue, can recover quickly. Those are the ones that succeed. Those are the ones that are making the strides and moving forward the fastest. And speaking about moving the fastest, AI, I've mentioned in other videos before, AI is an accelerator. It scales. It's a scaling engine that allows us not just to do more in quantity, but also in complexity, in variability, dealing with a constantly changing environment. Static structures can't keep up with AI-driven changes, and that leads to any misalignment leads to disruption, not transformation. So we need environments, we need workforce that is highly adaptable to keep up with the AI. If we're stuck with I need to have a plan and figure it out up front, and we can't have a failure, a deviation, your AI implementation is not going to work. You will run into problems. So practical steps to move forward is the first thing is you need to assess your mindset. Are your systems designed for change or control? If you're looking for that control, respectfully, I have to say, it's time to move forward. We succeeded. We succeeded in figuring out how to solve the simple problems, how to get to those economies of scales, how to execute reliably, repeatably. That type of work, we know how to do it. Focus on automating that. Focus on bringing AI to get that off of people's hands. That's the work that is the low-hanging fruit for AI implementation and automation. And those are the jobs that are at highest risk because those are the ones that we can map out. And if we can map it out, we can probably automate it. It's very simple to automate many of these things that previously we relied on humans. So if you're really attached to that kind of work, I'm so sorry to break the news, but you're at the front line of losing your job. So be careful with that. Instead, we really need to recognize that humanity is evolving away from that simple type of work to far more complex work that's scary in many ways and exciting in other ways, because it's a lot of unknown. It's a lot of figuring it out, discovering it as you're moving forward, as you're taking every step every day. And that I understand. It's very disorienting to people who have been accustomed to having the plan. There's a comfort in having that plan, in knowing up front, I get it, I understand, and that world is coming to an end. That's the hard truth. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to move forward. So for all of the groups that are stuck in being required to come up with these requirements up front and plans, hard plans up front, I'm sorry, you're going to have to change or stop altogether, because that's what AI is going to do. So we need to also surface the defaults. Understand what are your defaults and your attitudes and your approaches. Are you assuming that work should be figured out before it begins? Or are you creating room for discovery? We need that room for discovery. We need to start conversations and stop the mandates. Use dialogue to explore the benefits of embracing dynamic practices, because that's what we need in order to deal with this constantly changing and fast changing world. And in order for this to work, we need to create safe learning zones. There needs to be psychological safety for teams to experiment, reflect, and improve without fear. This benchmark of getting it right on one shot is no longer a reality of our world. We have to build the muscles to help us develop our adaptive skills and structures to support changing work, dynamic work, flexible work. We need to develop cross-functional teams that are capable of bringing up a wide breadth and depth of expertise to solve those problems as we discover them, because we don't know them yet. And we need to use short planning cycles, because all of those long-term plans, sorry, for dynamic work, you're just going to throw them away. You're going to have to, because you're going to discover something that is going to change that plan. So give up on trying to come up with it. Instead, look at short-term plans that have, yes, perhaps a long-term perspective. And again, we keep the end result, the desired outcome of all of this work, we keep that in sight, definitely. We're going to Europe. We're not setting off to go to Europe and ending up in Australia. No. Okay, we're going to end up in Europe. But the path to get us there could be completely different to what we expected, to what we set out to do from the very beginning. It's a changing world. It's a fast changing, and it's also exciting, because when we work this way in a dynamic way, there's a lot of fun, a lot of puzzles, a lot of cool things to figure out along the way. It's no longer just this droning execute the same thing day in, day out. That frankly, I don't know. Some people enjoy it, and I get that. So sorry, that's coming to an end, and the world coming up front ahead is full of discovery, full of learning, full of figuring out. And this is what ultimately makes us human, the ability to adapt and respond to the unknown. That's what we're good at. So we need to focus on what we're good on. So drop a line in the comments. Share your experience. How do you see planning? How do you approach it? Is it a blueprint that you have to follow without deviation? Or is it a flexible guide that adjusts as the work evolves? And if you'd like to learn more about how cross-functional teams break down silos that keep us divided and in that eye-shaping, and also help us drive innovation, click on one of these. I'll be happy to tell you all about it.